Good morning, I'm Corin from Greenwood Bonsai Studio in Nottingham. We're just approaching Easter weekend. It's Good Friday today and we're hoping to be quite busy at the nursery with customers. We've had new delivery of trees. You can see we've got nice Deshojo maples all coming into leaf at this time of year with bright red foliage on. But we've come in early today, so before we open the gates to customers, we'll do a little video for you for this weekend. Along with these maples that we've had delivered recently, we've had over 1,000 trees arrive in just this last week. We've had a selection of junipers turn up, Chinese Juniper, and I thought it'd be nice to work on one of those for you today. This batch of junipers here, they've been grown for bonsai use, but they haven't had much bonsai refinement. They're about 15 years old. They've started off life growing in a field, and now they're planted into nursery plant pots. These were quite popular for us here last year. We listed them on our website and we call them Lockdown Junipers. We've gone through 2 or 3 COVID lockdowns here in the UK, and junipers like this that need a little bit of work, we think they're ideal for the enthusiast who's probably off work or got a bit more time on their hands and they want to get stuck in and have a go at producing a bonsai themselves. So unusually for us, we do sell them in this sort of unfinished state so that you can refine them and put your own touch to them yourself. So we've got quite a selection of these. They're all quite nice trees, quite usable. We'll grab one and we'll show you how to style it as a bonsai. Okay, so we're in the studio now to be working on this Chinese Juniper, and usually if I was styling this and it was sort of nursery stock material, my first procedure with a tree like this will be to take it out of the pot and to find the base of the trunk. Often when you buy nursery stock, they can be potted quite deep, and it isn't uncommon to find a level of soil before you find the base of the trunk. But because these have been potted up for bonsai use, these are actually potted at the right sort of level. So I'm going to have a little bit of a delve round at the base, just a little bit of a tidy up of some of these surface roots. But the soil level here does look to be correct at the base of the tree. There's a little root there that's too high up the trunk. We can remove that off. Just turn it off like that, because there's another one beneath it. So a little bit of investigating round there, so we know we've found the base of the tree, and then we can start styling the top of the tree. Okay. So this tree, just had a very, very brief look at it. We've just carried it in off the bench. It's quite easy to see with this one. This is quite full on this side. This side is a little bit more open. So to work with the tree, this would appear to be a more natural front to this particular plant. But let's have a look and see if that does come true or not. So first things first, good clean sharp pair of scissors, and what I'm going to do with this, obviously it's a bit difficult because I've got to work with it to myself when I'm working on it, and then I'll try and rotate it so you can see what work I've done. Yeah. It's a fairly short procedure with a tree like this, but basically we're going to trim it, cut off sort of nonsense growth we don't need, things that are growing down too much, up too much, crossing branches that are in the wrong sort of position on the tree. And then we're going to wire and shape the remaining branches, and finally we're going to pot it up. So this demonstration will take this tree from what it is now to the finished product. So if you fancy having a go at doing one of these yourself and you purchase one off us, this procedure I'm doing today is a sort of how to work on one of these trees. So turn it around here towards me. This branch here is coming from the trunk and sloping down a lot. I don't need it. There's one here on the right hand side that just wants some growth taken off the bottom of it. This one here is too low down on the tree. Again, it's sweeping down quite low. There's a better one next to it, so I potentially might use this one instead. I know this one here is a little bit stumpy. It's not the most elegant branch, but let's see. It's gonna, if we go with this other side as the front, it is going to be towards the rear of the tree, so it might not notice so much. So the next stage I'm just going to work my way through the tree, just taking off bits of growth I don't need. when we're designing the tree now, we're going to think about where the front of the tree is and which branches to keep. We need to see the structure of the tree, and you can't see the structure when it's just really full like this. So I find the best way to tackle that is to work my way up through the tree with a pair of scissors, pulling out little bits of growth I don't need. Now you'll get little bits of growth on these junipers growing straight from the trunk and in the sort of nooks and crannies of branches. And what I'm doing is removing a lot of this growth so that I can see the structure. I'm not sort of making a lot of design decisions, but I'm just sort of getting in there, pulling out these little wispy bits of growth and little bits that we don't need, just so that I can then see the branches that we think we might utilise as part of the design. And some of these fine little shoots and branches, you don't even have to cut them off with scissors. Some of them, it's just a matter of just sort of pinching them out with your fingertips so you can see the tree a little bit more clearly. So a little bit more of that to do around this side. Yeah, these are beautiful trees to work on. I've worked on quite a few last year, and I don't think I've done one that doesn't shape up really nice. They're quite rewarding to work on, but they're also fairly easy to work on. The trunk of these has already been shaped, so the trunk has already got some sinuous movement to it. So you can often find these trees at garden centres, and if you can find them at garden centres, then quite honestly, you know, they will be cheaper, yeah, but they won't have movement in the trunk. They'll normally be a bit straight and boring, so you've got a little bit more of a task to try and get movement in the trunk. You've probably got to use, you've at least got to use heavy wire, maybe advanced techniques to get movement into the trunk. But the good thing with these, they've already had that work done. So the framework for bonsai is already there. So with a little bit of pruning and a bit of easy wiring, they shape up really nicely. So I'm just pinching out some of that growth, and you should start to see it getting a bit less dense, and you should start to glimpse, you could probably start to glimpse some of the branches, start to see the structure of the tree a little bit more. And that's really what we're aiming for at this stage of work. There's probably a little bit more to do up at the top there. Pinch that bit out, this bit out. So if I turn it round to you now, you can see the difference that's made. And this would be an ideal fronting here. We've got nice movement coming up here to the right, doubles back here, all the way up through the tree. Really quite attractive. It gives us a nice bit of movement, but it's not too contorted. A little bit more pruning in here. Right, so let's have a little bit of a look now, the styling of the tree. And we'll lift it up a little bit so we can look at it at eye level. And the front of it is going to be in here. I'll just make a notch on the pot. So if you line that up with the trunk, probably to you just there, that's the sort of view that we're aiming for as a working front. You can mark it with a bit of wire, or just notch the pot, or a little chopstick or something like that. So with this is the front of the tree and this is the apex, we just need to work out everything else in between, okay? So first of all, when we're looking at the branches, it's nice to have a branch on the outside of a curve, and this curve here, we've got an ideally placed branch here on the right. The branches that are a bit more of a nuisance are these here on the left. We've got this one that's quite heavy, the lowest branch, but it's coming out underneath this curve. We've got another one coming out slightly higher up, and then we've got quite a thick branch coming out higher still. So of those few, this lowest one, I don't really need. I don't like the way it comes out here, it's a bit low. I don't like the way it forms out of that trunk, because it sort of comes out at the front and then crosses over. So in with a pair of concave pruners and just remove that branch. So the next one, this could be a usable branch for us, but then we've also got another one above it, but then that's a little bit too chunky. So it just depends whether we want to keep that or not. I think with this one, this lowest one we'll remove, and we'll keep this one here because it's in a better place. So I'm going to remove this lowest one here. We're going to keep this one here. We're going to wire this section down. So this piece here, I'm going to trim this back. I'm going to wire this down to the front of the tree. We'll keep this next section here. This bit here is growing up a little bit too much. So if we can shorten that back and this back and this little bit just here, and maybe just pinch those tips out just a little bit to tidy that up. Then round here towards the back, this is a good usable branch, but we can just be shortened back a little bit. And then we've got that branch to the back that we weren't sure about. Let's have a look from the front. That fills in quite nicely, so I don't see why we can't keep that. There's another one in here. There's 1, 2, 3 here. It's perhaps getting a little bit busy. So this middle one, let's take this middle one out, and we can, this space, we've got this one now, and then this one will wire down to fill that space. Probably shorten it back a little bit like that. So we've got the front of the tree organised. This lowest section isn't too bad up to about here. So now we get up to this sort of section, and again we'll just have a little explore. We've got a good positioning of this branch just here. Another one here on that right hand side, so that's quite usable. So really all I've got to do with this one on the left hand side is cut it back a little bit more and cut off some of the growth that's growing down a little bit too much, just to lighten that branch up. And then another one further up the tree, same sort of procedure with that. Trim back the tips of it. This one here is quite usable, but we've got a little bit of growth coming down from it, so that can just be tidied up with a pair of scissors, and that just leaves us this section at the apex. This is the most vigorous part of the tree, so it's got some longer growth on it, and it is quite bushy and compact. So we'll see if we can't thin that out a little bit in that upper section. So in this little bit here, we've got to try and decide where the top of the tree is. It does split quite a bit, this tree. There's a couple of heavy shoots. It actually comes straight up, making this sort of the top of the tree, but then this branch here is quite heavy, goes off to the right. So we need to do something to organise that. And I would suggest that we make the top out of this more vertical one, and then we try to take this other one back. This is quite lumpy, this section in here on the right hand side. This is quite lumpy and it drops down. Don't really want that to be the top of the tree. There's another bit of growth behind it which I think is more delicate and usable, so we're going to take off this section here to taper this top in a little bit more. And then that cut where that's come off, we can clean that up a little bit with just using a narrow headed concave pruner. And I know that looks a bit open at the moment. When we wire it, we're going to wire this to fill in. You'll see that in a minute. So these little shoots that are growing down, as we did before, they just want a little bit of adjusting, a little bit of pruning on this top section. Just get in there with your scissors, take out some of these little bits of growth that we don't need, and we're nearly done. We've nearly done the sort of first pass of the pruning scissors. little few more bits to pinch out here. This section here is a little bit clunky. Just shorten that back a little bit. So with pruning, without any wiring, we've gone from that image that we had earlier to this. Now, if you're the sort of bonsai hobbyist, perhaps you've started off and you've not been doing it too long, you know, some of you might not have done much wiring, and that's okay. And if you're one of those people, you can still get this sort of shape to the tree purely by just using a pair of scissors for, what, 10 minutes or so. But to get a better shape to this tree and a little bit more refinement, our next stage with this tree is going to put some wire onto the tree, okay? So the next procedure with this tree now is to get it wired. I've got a selection of wire here in front of me. I always use it off this wire caddy of mine. I'm using aluminium wire. For those of you in America, it's a bit like aluminum. I learnt with aluminum wire and copper wire in America when I was doing my bonsai apprenticeship. Most people in the UK tend to use aluminium wire, and we've got 1 mil, 1.5, 2 mil, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 5 millimeter wire. We're not likely to be using the thicker stuff on this. We'll use the sort of 1.5 to 2.5 mil wire on this tree. And I'll talk my way through what we're doing. So we're going to put some wire on the tree to allow us to shape and position some of these branches, just to get them into a more ideal position. So we'll start off with a bit of 2.5 mil wire. We're going to do this back branch, and we're going to bring the wire up around and onto this one here on the left hand side. And we're always wiring 2 branches with 1 piece of wire. So the branch thickness, the wire thickness, sorry, is dictated by the branch thickness. So we're using a piece of wire that's about half as thick as the branch that we're trying to bend for this sort of species. And we want to wire 2 branches with 1 piece. So we're going from the trunk along this lowest branch and then along this branch at the back. I'm using a pair of wire scissors just to help me manipulate the end of the wire through these branches. We don't want to trap any foliage. And we just wind the wire through at about a 45-degree angle, nice and neat. And this piece of wire is going to do this little branch here on the back, and it's going to come up onto this one here. And at the moment, when you're doing this sort of work, I tend to just do the application of the wire. I see that as a sort of technical ability, and then once I've actually got the wire on the tree, we can do the creative aspect of shaping, which is the actual manipulation and moving the branches. Now, for the beginners amongst you that haven't done this before, it can seem a little bit daunting. Wiring the branches is just a temporary training aid. It just allows us to put wire on the tree. It allows us to position the branches, and they'll stay set in that position. A lot of people ask how long you leave the wire on for. There's no sort of set time. It's about keeping an eye on the tree and seeing when the wire is ready to come off. Obviously, as the tree grows, the branches swell and get thicker, and therefore over time the wire can be seen to cut into the tree. Ideally, this never happens, and you remove the wire before that happens. In my last 30 years of growing bonsai, I've wired a tree in spring, I've wired a maple in spring, and the wire was cutting in 3 weeks and had to be removed. I've also, on the other end of that scale, I've wired an old pine tree, a Scots pine, when I was in the United States, and that wire was still on that tree 6 years later. It didn't need removing because it hadn't cut in. Because it was an older tree and it was growing an awful lot slower, so it hadn't yet needed to be removed. So there's no set time, you know. You will hear people say take the wire off after 6 months or after a year, and really it's hard to quantify. The best answer, if somebody says when do I take the wire off, the best time to take it off is a week before it cuts in. Sometimes that varies, yeah. So it's all about looking at your trees, knowing your trees, keeping an eye on them. As you're working on your trees or you're watering your trees, obviously if it's wired, you want to just be checking it, making sure to see if it wants removing. And it might possibly, the wire might possibly need to be taken off in stages. You might find it cuts in more at the top of the tree, rather than lower down the tree. You might find it cuts in more on a dominant vigorous branch, of course, because that will be growing maybe at a faster rate than other sections of the tree. So it's always worth just keeping an eye on your tree whenever you're spending time with your trees, you know, which you tend to be doing on a daily basis, particularly in summer, because you're keeping them well watered. So I'm just going to carry on. A few more of these up at the top want wiring. We're just sort of pairing these branches off with little bits of 2mm, 2.5mm wire. Another section up here. I'm going to wire towards myself, move the foliage out of the way, make it nice and neat. Try not to cross any wires over. Try not to trap any foliage against the branches. If you haven't done any wiring before, it can seem quite challenging, particularly when you start, but it soon gets easier the more you do. There's another little one here that isn't wired. That only wants a little bit of 1.5mm wire. It's a bit of an isolated branch here, so we can just tag the wire across to this other one that we've already done, and that will help to secure this wire onto that branch. You know, traditionally you'd use annealed copper wire, and a lot of people still do. When I learnt to wire with Bill Valavanis, he taught me with copper wire, because if you learn with copper wire, then when you switch to aluminium, it's an easier transition. Whereas if you learn with an aluminium wire, then switching to copper can sometimes be a little bit more challenging. But for speed, ease of use, and particularly for like a quick demonstration purpose like this, I have resorted to favouring aluminium. Just don't tell Bill about that, because he loves his copper wire. There's another little section here wants wiring. This tip of this branch. This was a heavy branch, and then it goes to 2 finer branches at the tip. So they both want a little bit of wire on them. And the apex, there's a little bit in there. We might not have to wire that little stub. Let's see. There's one here that I want a bit of wire on. Again, quite a small little shoot that is. There's a little stub of a branch here. Let me just neaten that up before I get in there and do the wire. There's 2 little sections just here. That little one there. And then this one here. So if we can get those 2 done, it just allows us to position those into the back of the tree, give them a nice little space to sit. They're a little bit in the wrong place at the moment. So with a bit of wiring, sort of whatever, 10 minutes or so, pop a little bit of wire on the tree. We've pretty much got most of that tree wired now. People can often think that wiring the tree gives it shape. It isn't the wiring that gives it the shape, it's the next procedure. So the next procedure is actually positioning the branches now they've been wired. So the wire allows me to get a branch, for instance like this one here, and allows me to bend it and move it, and it will stay set in position. If you bend that and it doesn't stay set, it springs back. It's normally because your wire isn't thick enough, or you've not applied it correctly. Then here, this one, I want this branch to come down and forward like this. This one here, I want to come down. So just carefully manipulating these branches, now we've wired them, to get the shape we need. So I need to turn the tree with the front to me. I'm going to bring this one down here. This one's coming into here a little bit. This one's like this. That one at the back can sit in just there. This will come down to here. That little one at the back wants to be rotated a little bit and dropping into there. This one filling in here. This one wants to sit like that. this shoot here is growing up too much. And then the top of the tree, we can bring that back and then over like so. This section here wants to be like this. So now we've positioned the branches, the tree's now looking like this, with them wired and put into position. Now we've still got a few more things to do. Because we've got branches that were growing upwards and we've brought them down, we've got foliage that has now moved. This foliage was growing up and out, now it's growing down. So what we need is definition between these foliage pads. And there's a level that you need to trim this to in my eyes. If you over trim it, it can look too artificial. It can look like you've sort of plucked too much growth off it. We want these foliage pads to be independent, but we want them to work together as part of the tree. Yeah? So what we're going to do, we'll start off with a pair of scissors and we'll just start off on the underside of these foliage pads. We'll trim off stuff on the underside and then we can either pinch or trim the growth on the top. So the underside, you can shear across it a little bit if you're careful. The upper sections, you're better either pinching the growth out or trimming it so you don't get too many brown tips of the juniper foliage. On the underside you can trim it a little bit more because if you do get a little bit of browning, you generally don't see it when it's underneath the foliage pad. So a little bit here, a little bit here. A little bit in here. Just trying to get a flat underside to the foliage pad and give us a little bit of definition at the same time. This little one here is wired, just wants that trimming off. And you should start to see it take shape a little bit more as we take these sections out. That's growing down a bit too much, just wants a little bit of a prune here. Still a little bit too much growth up at the top. Let's see if we can just thin some of that out. We can pinch back some of those strong growing tips, a little bit of a prune with scissors on these as well, like this. So with a bit of scissor pruning now and a bit of pinching, organising the growth, then our tree is now again looking a little bit more sensible. If I turn the front towards you there. Okay, now it's time for the last procedure, which is to pot this tree up. It's been grown in the ground, and then for the last year or so, it's been in a nursery pot. Let's have a look, see how long it's been in here for. We'll know when we take it out. It's probably been in there for about half a year, maybe a year, judging by that root growth. And the snag now is to see what pot we can get it into. The aim is to get it into a bonsai pot. But obviously, this is quite deep, these roots. So it's a good time of year to do this in early spring. We're just going to see what these roots are like, and that will dictate whether we can get it into a bonsai pot or whether we have to go to a slightly deeper training pot. So using a root hook, just comb the soil out from the roots, working away round the tree. You can see it's put some good root growth out into that new soil from that larger pot. But there's definitely a more solid root system further back in this root ball. So let's see if that's going to cause us any problems, or whether we can deal with that. Very, very tough round this side. Now we have taken off a fair bit of the top growth of this tree, and it's a good time of year to do it. So we should be able to reduce the roots to some extent. So if we can go in with a pair of green scissors and reduce the roots to about this level. Now if you were doing this yourself at home and you weren't so confident doing this procedure, there's nothing to stop you doing the top work and then just leaving it in the plant pot for the rest of this year. You know, if you were buying one of these offers sort of you know, in May or June time, when you've perhaps missed the opportunity to repot it in spring, it wouldn't harm if you just waited and repotted it maybe in the autumn time. Little root there wants taking off, and just trying to get rid of some of these excess roots and some of this this old compost, so we can incorporate new fresh compost into the root ball to give it more vigour going forward. I say this will look drastic to some of you. Some of you, if you've been doing bonsai for a number of years, this won't really bother you at all. You know, we work on hundreds of these trees, and I do this same procedure to all of them. That one's taking off there, a little root here. Let's see if we can just tidy up that a little bit. A little bush. Put some stragglers off. Right, so now we've got the tree and we've prepared it for a pot. So let's have a look and see what pot choices we've got. I think it's going to be a little bit in between pot sizes. We've got some 8-inch pots and some 10-inch pots, and that's an 8-inch pot, which is a little bit too tight for it really, I would say. This is a 10-inch pot, and it's probably a little bit too big for it, but we don't have one in between, so let's have a think about that. We've got a little drum pot, little round drum pot here. Looks quite nice in that, give it a bit more space. And then that was that 8-inch pot. We've got a different design here, 8-inch pot, but it's got a bit more volume capacity to it, so it's potentially fairly comfortable in that. And an oval goes nice with the movement in the trunk. And we've got one of these shaped pots with the pinched in corners, a 10-inch pot. That's a little bit too big. We've got the same in 8-inch. Maybe this would be more suitable. I think that's probably the better of all of them. The reason for that, I quite liked it in, it looked quite nice in this oval. Looked quite nice in the drum pot. But because we've took it out of a deep pot, this one is a little bit deeper. So rather than go down into something too shallow and sort of have to shoehorn it in and force it in, we're going to use this one just to give us a little bit more volume. So let's get the, we've got the tree ready for the pot. Let's get the pot ready for the tree. So a piece of 2mm wire, just bend into a U shape, popped up through the drainage holes, just to secure the tree into the pot. And this is a fairly small pot and a basic sort of repotting procedure. So just a piece of wire like that, and then a piece of mesh put over the drainage holes is all we need to do in this instance. It's got a couple of smaller wire holes in it. We'll just put a little piece over there as well to stop the soil falling out. And for this repotting procedure, for this tree, we're going to use a mixture of Akadama and Kiryu soil. So let's just raise the tree up a little bit, and we'll pop a bit of our mixture in there. It's about a 50-50 mixture of Akadama and Kiryu. And then we'll take our tree and see how it fits within the pot. I want to get a little bit more to the right in the pot. So a little bit of root off that right hand side to allow me to get it here towards you. So we don't want it in the centre of the pot, I want it a little bit to the right, leaning to the left. So that will make best use of the tree. A little bit round like that. So once we get it in the pot like that, just hold it in position. Add the compost, and then use a chopstick or potting stick just to firm that in as we go around the tree, just to work that soil compost in to the edges of the root ball, like so. Once we've done that, then we need a bonsai plier, and we're just going to take this wire across the back of the tree, bring this one up to meet it, hold the tree in position, just pull and twist the wire to take up any slack. So once it's nice and secure in there, we trim off that excess wire, push it down into the soil, and it's ever so secure in the pot, not going anywhere. We can add a bit more akadama if we need to. So once it's potted like that, another final little piece of work. Let's have a look at it, because when you've potted trees up, you'll always get little things move about on them, and it might not be quite as everything might not be quite where you want it to be. So just have another look and make sure we're happy with all the branches that we've got and they haven't moved too much and they're in the right position. This one wants to come down a little bit more like this, a little bit off the underside of that. This one wants to come down a little bit more, this one into here. Don't forget, there's no point putting wire on branches if you're not then going to shape them. So once you've put the wire on and you've gone to the effort of doing that, then you want to actually put a little bit of movement in the branches, move them to where you want them to be, just to give the tree a bit more interest. And then those branches that we cut off, the thicker branches, just use a little bit of lac balsam or some sort of wound sealant of your choice. And these cuts here at the front, where I've took those branches off, dab a little bit of wound sealant onto those to hide those cuts so you can't see them cosmetically, and to help and promote healing. And then all important with this tree, with any tree that we've done this work on, is to lift it outside and give it a water. I try to work quite quick on my trees so that they're not out the soil, out the old pot for long. They haven't got the roots in the air for long. Just get them potted, then get them back outside, give them a good soak, a good water, and then just look after them in the next few weeks. So this is one of our little lockdown junipers. If you fancy having a go with one of these yourself, we've got a few on our website, bonsai.co.uk. Just search for Lockdown Juniper. We'll have them on there, and we'll be putting a few on over the next few weeks. They're available for sale here at the nursery in Nottingham. If you want to pop up and have a look through them all and pick yourself a nice one. They're lovely little trees, very, very rewarding to work on, and I really enjoy doing this sort of work, these demonstrations and these presentations. Please like our channel, subscribe to it, watch some of our other videos. We're getting the hang of it now, so there'll be plenty more to come shortly. Thank you very much.